Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Inventor, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hi, everyone. I hope you're hanging tight and that you're safe and that you're not too fearful after what's happened this week in this country. And we had scheduled another topic altogether that we recorded about a week and a half ago. To kick off 2020, but historical events changed the course of the future, and so here we are. We decided to change course, and it was really prompted by yesterday's event at the capital, nation's capital, and everyone's commenting and weighing in and talking about, the obvious, like, if it was Black and brown people, they would have all been killed. And, how this was the handwriting on the wall, was already there and all of that, So this morning I woke up after a very stressful evening, just trying to explain, the shit show to my kids. And I woke up to such a powerful text sent over by my dear friend, Joel Hodroff. And I just had to bring him today just to talk about his view and the solutions. Let's talk about solutions, viable solutions, right? To stop this hemorrhaging of our humanity. And thank you, Joel. He's an inventor, social entrepreneur, economic futurist. He's a friend. We met through a goal setting session, and we were put together in a room, and now we're working on some major projects. And I'm tickled pink that you said yes and moved your schedule, Joel, to do this with me today, because your text really moved me. And again, welcome to I Have Something to Say. And I had to have Chris on the line too, because it's just too powerful to just handle by myself. So how are you? And welcome, Joel, and thank you for inspiring me this morning with your long ass text that really drove home, what we can be doing to solve these issues.
And I was not privy to that text, so I'm interested in hearing this.
So me and Chris, thank you. It's really fun and an honor to join you. I think we're building a powerful partnership between our Twin Cities organization that's actually information. We haven't fully branded it, but it's all about rapid economic recovery, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and sustainability. Three critical issues: the economy, the environment, and equity, which is what is often called the triple bottom line economics. And instead of just old-fashioned money-centered, profit-centered economics, it's people, profit, and planet. So the well-being of our people, we believe a universally high quality of life is now possible across the board, because if you look across the economy, we're wasting more wealth than we're deploying. College desks empty more than they're full. Food as an abundant renewable resource, yet grocery aisles here and around the world empty more than they're full, And oftentimes around the world, grocery shelves empty more than they're full. But global agribusiness, one of the most powerful institutions on the planet, wants more customers, but you can't be a customer if you don't have the money. But we invented money to match buyers and sellers. And so there's a giant missed business opportunity where businesses have tons of excess capacity because of the nature of competition that forces down market share, profits, and wages. And so here we have massive excess capacity side by side with massive unmet need. And I'll just say this and then go into what your interests and questions are in the interview. We believe we have a profound new approach that's beyond left versus right. We are so stuck. Everything we're seeing in the Capitol or in the economy or in politics is all about the battle of left versus right. Well, left and right is just a made up political phenomenon, just like money's a made up political phenomenon or economic phenomenon. So here's what we know it's going to take to get beyond left versus right. And so what you might call the scary, crazy, lunatic fringe on either side, the ones that want to take over with a small number of people and violence or whatever, they can be marginalized, while the overwhelming majority that respects one another, despite how people voted, I think people got deathly ill from the last election season, where it was nothing but attack, complain, attack, complain. All right. So how do you get beyond left versus right in economics and commerce? Number one, for conservatives and libertarians, the solution has to be 100% voluntary. The government can't be in there telling them what to do. That's our solution. It's a business model, sometimes called a disruptive business model or a very innovative business model. Number two, it needs to be self-funding. Conservatives, libertarians don't want you reaching into their pocket to fund your programs. So that's fine. This is completely self-funding because it's a money and payment systems innovation that gets a piece of the transaction fee action. Number three, for conservatives and libertarians, business-led, market-based, and profit-driven. Just respect what we've got going because it's produced some pretty substantial economic gains. They're just not distributed efficiently or equitably. Now, for the left, which would be liberals, radicals, Greens, number one, it's got to be immediate and not trickle down. So when you look across the economy at all this wasted wealth and you monetize it with a new financial instrument, which is what we've invented, a ledger currency rather than a token riding a ledger, then the solutions are immediate rather than, oh, you've got to build up a business that represents your people. And then once you're successful, if you ever are, then your people will benefit. No, everybody can benefit from today's excess capacity. Secondly, it's got to be equitable. And again, closing disparities today out of the available dollars is nothing but win-lose economics. It's exactly where we've been stuck for decades and why we're not seeing progress. But closing disparities out of massive empty college desks, massive empty restaurant tables, massive empty entertainment venues, massive empty everything you've got, grocery aisles and on is simple, quick, child's play. But we can't do it because everything we know about money economics and commerce was inherited from an era of scarcity that drove win-lose competition over money and a grow or die business imperative. Today, sufficiency or enough for all can drive win-win cooperation and sustainability. We don't need more and more competing businesses launched. We can just be more efficient, which is also a conservative economic principle, efficiency, not extra government programs, not extra nonprofit programs. But these came along because by itself, the free enterprise system is not solving these problems. And any conservative who says everything's fine if government stays out of it actually forgot that in 1929, there was no big government programs whatsoever, and the stock market crashed, and we had a 10-year depression. So third, the sustainability factor I've already mentioned. For the left, Greens, radicals, it needs to be environmentally sustainable. Quit using economic growth to beat up the environment and to pollute our bodies and to pollute our planet. And the massive renewable resources that would be giving us free energy if we organized around it, solar, wind, geothermal, hydro. It's so simple and logical, but today it looks like somebody's got to lose. But in a new economy of abundance, it's all win-win. So for the left, rapid, equitable, sustainable. All right.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
do you want
I
to take
mean,
this discussion?
no, 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 that's fine. I mean, but and the thing is, it's like these two polarizing views, right? Ideologies that j- have just lost any kind of communication with each other. That's it. That's where we're at right now, which is what then the outcome is what we just experienced yesterday, and so the question that you posed that drove you to write the text that you sent this morning was how do we address the fear and polarization caused by recent events in Washington and other violent events that many people consider important actions on behalf of their particular issues, right? And it's about exactly that is finding ways where everyone can live with dignity and tapping into the excess that already exists there and implement programs and a new model, really, that right that gives value to other things or different value to what the current currency we use, which is money, the dollar, right, is. And so it's so funny because your opening line, that's what caught me, said it's time to declare that we are done as a democracy with small groups on the left or the right seeking to impose their agendas on the nation through disruptive and violent acts against people and property. I believe this is one thing that the overwhelming majority of people can align around, whether you agree or not with why they're doing that, right? And then this concept of local to global rapid recovery alliance, that really focuses on values and also a new kind of leadership where we're all leaders. That's kind of like it, right? Um, is at the core of it. Was very, very interesting to me, and so I figured I wanted to bring you on so we can go through each one of these points that you kind of explained now, but really that why how did you land here? Just tell me how did you land in a space where you um don't value, really, you give like a whole other value to money. You have kind of figured out how we can really quickly transform how we do human exchanges and make sure that we meet everybody's needs, really, and also how that's directly tied into developing like basically dismantling current social contracts, right, and creating new ones that really benefit everybody and that everyone's happy, everybody can very much live well, which is not what's happening right now.
Right. So when there's competition over scarce dollars, and they are scarce, I mean, I've got the perfect example. A decade ago, the sharing economy, in a matter of 3 years, with just the slight penetration of mobile apps and social media into the economy, in 3 years, building their own technology every step of the way. And I'm going to explain why the technology to do this is everywhere right now. So the sharing economy created millions of jobs and billions of dollars of new wealth out of the excess capacity of a few solopreneurs, small business people, an empty room in someone's home or an idle car. So if we created billions of dollars of new wealth in just a few years, a decade ago, out of a small amount of our excess capacity, can you imagine what would be possible today with the excess capacity of the whole economy? But nobody understands that lesson because filtered through win-lose competition over money, which is the current paradigm, somebody had to take the hit for the rise of Airbnb and Uber. So hotels, motels, and their employees took the hit from Airbnb, cab drivers, limo drivers, and their companies took the hit from Uber and Lyft. Now, why does somebody have to take the hit? Not because the wealth isn't expanding exponentially, but because the money is filtering the wealth through an eyedropper. So when people say trickle down, that's what they're talking about. We should all be rising as rapidly as advances in technology, as advances in infrastructure, as advances in human skill, knowledge, and creativity, as advances in the use of renewable resources. But instead, the standard of living and quality of life for individuals, families, and communities rises and falls with the economic fate of an individual family breadwinner, of an individual company, of an individual industry, or of an individual nation. That's all because of win-lose competition over money. Now, what do I mean when I say the technology to do this is already here? In 1993, I founded a company, and you sort of asked, well, where does this all come from? That's a longer podcast. But I grew up in a family that owned a Jewish mortuary, and that was right at the intersection of business, community service, religion or spirituality, and emotional healing. So I call that my roots in holistic social entrepreneurship. Before there were words for any of it, that's now become a popular concept: holistic change, systemic change, respectful of the environment change. But it hasn't been turned into a new economics yet. We're still dragging all those powerful values through the mud of win-lose competition over scarce dollars. Now, what metaphor can I give you for the capture of excess business capacity? It's monetization. See, that's a very important term, because the sharing economy monetizes the excess capacity of an empty room in someone's home or an idle car. Barter monetizes the excess capacity of individuals trading their time. Fix my car, I'll paint your house. Watch my kids, I'll give you vegetables from my garden. Or business excess capacity. Hotels trade empty rooms, airlines trade empty seats, the media trades in the trillions. None of them ever buys a fleet of cars. Why? Because auto executives need motel stays, airline flights, and advertising. So the monetization of excess capacity takes many forms, and we've decided to monetize it with something we call community service dollars. Why? If you think about loyalty rewards, that's the monetization of excess business capacity, right? Empty motel and hotel rooms are monetized into points. Who else? The gas station's now accepting loyalty rewards, and you can even earn them at the grocery store and spend them at the gas station. So there's been an evolution in the art of loyalty rewards, where it used to be earn one place and spend one place. Well, that's now, our model is earn anywhere and spend anywhere. And it used to be save up your points, your frequent flyer miles, your Starbucks points, your motel, Hilton honors. Why? Because you had to spend 100% points. But today you can pay part cash, part rewards. Well, I actually patented that long before the loyalty industry was using it, but the patents expired because I couldn't get the technology built, and they did. But that's fine, because here's what's now possible. Instead of only rewarding consumer spending, which means whoever has the most money now gets the most rewards, not a very level playing field, we say reward other things that add social value. Reward community volunteerism, reward youth academic performance, reward stay-at-home moms and dads. My God, we have paid cooking, cleaning, shopping, laundry, chauffeuring, childcare, senior care in the cash economy. How come stay-at-home moms and dads have to be volunteers? Think of what that would do to close disparities in this country if stay-at-home moms and dads got paid just like in the cash economy, only they got paid in community service dollars redeemable at merchants. So I could go on, but what's now possible using the examples from the sharing economy of monetizing excess capacity, loyalty rewards, monetizing excess capacity, and then redeeming them for more than consumer spending, and redeeming them anywhere, not a competing reward, but a cooperative reward. Now we're talking about, again, a paradigm shift or a business innovation that serves the left and the right by lifting up everybody together. No more win-lose competition over money.
Right.
Yeah. Then I love it in the sense where it does provide something of value that you can use, to improve your lifestyle, and to and it also makes us a kinder world. Now,
Absolutely.
the
Way
problem
kinder.
what?
way kinder world. Yes.
The world. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. The only, but that's going to take a huge mind shift, and I think the time is right. The one thing though is a big barrier. Okay, is people that are putting their heels in the ground and resisting this because of other variables, which is like the systemic racism and the patriarchy, and other types of barriers really that come into the equity, right, into the equity space, that need to be addressed. And so then what are your thoughts on how to handle that?
I'm very excited to talk about that because I love the rise of the DEI movement. And it's a level of consciousness, but also a level of an empowerment that is unprecedented in our history. We have to update the social contract all the way back to when we took this land, the white arrivals from, England, and started a melting pot where everybody was supposed to come in and follow their cultural norms. But we took this land from the indigenous people who lived here by force, with violence, with dirty tricks, like buying Manhattan Island for $24 in beads, or by putting smallpox in blankets and waging a genocidal war. Now, that was a long time ago, but people have been second-class citizens. Same with the kidnapping of Africans to be slave labor in our workforce. That's part of the social contract, along with the second-class status of women, that's never been updated. But you see, I think the DEI movement has a blind spot in many ways, and that is that if we work on our interpersonal relationships, that's the heart of the problem. But you see, nobody worked on themselves to end slavery. What happened was Northern industrial capitalism invented the technologies of industrial production, and that created wage labor, and wage labor was way more efficient than slave labor. So then Northern industrial capitalism rolled over the slave system in a matter of 5 years. It was violent. It didn't need to be violent. South Africa has shown us you can have a spiritually based truth and reconciliation movement, but that's exemplary that things change partly based on technology and partly based on new business practices. So it's called, in modern business parlance, minimum viable product and early adopters. Nobody could have taught the internet into the world. It would have been science fiction. Nobody could have taught Facebook into the world. It would have been science fiction. And yet all these things get a little tiny start. The minimum viable product of the internet was the Department of Defense and the campuses were working on a telecommunication system that went beyond the traditional switching stations and operators and wires to being, a wireless global telecommunication system. Now, if you tried to describe that to people into the world and said, well, there's a magic box on your desk and a magic box on their desk, and invisible waves carry your magic box content to theirs, and you open your box and woo, it just would have been nuts. But once they had built the rudimentary minimum viable product, then early adopters who were students and techies said, wow, can we build chat rooms? Can we build websites? Can we build email? And suddenly we're in a whole new world. And so the DEI community can take hold of this business model we're talking about, because now in an unprecedented fashion, we've got chief corporate DEI officers, diversity, equity, and inclusion officers in the biggest companies, in government agencies, in nonprofits. Now, we've had chief ethics officers, we've had chief sustainability officers, we've had chief corporate responsibility officers. How come it's never gotten us anywhere? And why would this be any different? Because we're talking about an economic paradigm shift that starts fulfilling on all these missions: ethics, sustainability, corporate responsibility. It's a triple bottom line economic model with an economic engine of monetizing currently excess capacity and stretching the dollar, not end running the dollar, not fighting the dollar, but stretching the coin of the realm, which again is why conservatives and liberals can team up, because there's no win-lose anymore. All right.
Yeah. Yes, totally, totally. And the beauty of it is that you're by maximizing the use of excess, then you're not creating more stuff. Let's just call it stuff.
Waste. Call it waste, which is what it is.
Yes.
We don't need any more waste, whether it's garbage or whether it's empty college desks. It's all waste.
Yes, that impacts the planet like in an adverse way. So it's just like, it's just all encompassing. It just really does help, repair and rebuild, I mean, this mess
Right.
that we've made of the world.
And it
So
honestly, I was just gonna say, no, I mean, just the cyclical aspect of the win-win aspect of this, the excess capacity, matching up with actual volunteer services or community building. And a lot of companies are afraid to do things because they don't feel connected to their community or don't feel they're, but if you can actually build, that's been one of my biggest proponents, and why, Joel, I'm so happy that we have all been connected here, because I'm very big on community building, and I feel that a lot of what's happened with the information and technology age is the I guess the expansion of what it meant to be a village or to be a community beyond geographical barriers, where you were held accountable to your neighbors because they knew everything about you and you know everything about them, and you're not going to do something foolish because your community holds you accountable to that. And I think if you can start building this local, and it doesn't have to be local in the model you're talking about, but in starting this localized model, or this model that fuels community building and people getting connected to each other in a local aspect, I think if that's happening simultaneously, in a state, nationally and globally, that the world can only benefit from that. So, I mean, it's a paradigm shift, certainly, but the ends, in my mind, certainly justify the process of going through this and figuring out how we can apply this to be a better society.
I want to build on something each of you has touched on. And by the way, since you're the tech person, I don't know, you may have to turn down the volume every time I'm speaking and slow down the speed, whatever it takes. But anyway, I want to talk about the nature of community and holding one another accountable. And I want to talk about what it actually is that causes people to unite and work shoulder to shoulder and give up their differences, because we have the most profound example in economic history. So first I'll do that, and then because it's completely misunderstood by economists and historians, and then I'll talk about the new community and accountability. So the 1929 stock market crash, brought on solely by the activities of the private sector, the broken money system that's never been fixed to this day, has crashed periodically for decades. You'd think economists would have addressed it, or the government or banks or whatever, but we've had the private sector, we've added the public sector, we've added the nonprofit sector, and now we have the social impact investing sector. None of them have gotten to the root of the problem, so we might as well get to the root or just give up. So now think about this. 10 years of depression, and suddenly in 18 months, without sending a single person to trade school or etiquette school, we had full war production. Now, isn't that amazing? The whole argument that people don't have the skills. People had the skills to go straight into industrial jobs at industrial paychecks and learn on the job. How did that happen? And why, though we're highly skilled, are we in another long, dragged out crash and recovery, just like 2008? Now, the theory about how that happened so quickly and so efficiently is that it was government spending on the war. But you see, we've had massive government spending and massive war since then, and it's never had the same outcome. So what was it actually? You got to think outside the traditional stories because they don't serve us. So what happened was, one, we had a common vision. Could we have a common vision from something other than war? And would that common vision allow people to put their differences aside and work shoulder to shoulder? Two, we had a new funding source. It was the government in that case, but we've invented a new funding source, the monetization of excess capacity and its distribution for every type of social good, right? It's just too simple to even believe once you think about the root causes of things. So that's number two, a new funding source. Fine, let's not use government funding. That's what pits left against right. Three, the least understood factor of all was it was a mobilization rather than everyday business as usual. What's everyday business as usual? It's the nonsense of leaving it to some professionals. Oh, we got a problem. Well, the government will solve it, or the politicians, or the technology people, or the health. Look at COVID. If we had mobilized instead of letting our first responders literally be overrun, what would that have looked like? Well, first, this new funding source and this common vision of fighting back COVID would have said, number one, let's have the post office deliver masks overnight to every home with instructions on how and why to use them. Number two, just like youth are mobilized for a war, in this particular case, youth are the least vulnerable part of the population. Mobilize youth to go door to door, explain this stuff, mobilize youth to build clinics in every neighborhood so that there's many stops on the way to the overcrowded institutional healthcare system. There's lots of training to do. There's lots of early detection and prevention and treatment to do, shy of putting someone into the hospital. And what do we pay those youth with? How about a free college education, just like the GI Bill that 70 years ago rewarded returning soldiers? How can we afford to do it 70 years ago and not afford to do it today, side by side with massive empty college desks? So common vision, working shoulder to shoulder, giving up our differences, that's what disappears racism, not a lot of nice talk. No offense to anybody. Yes, you actually hear the stories of your coworkers and their oppression, and you can relate to it, because part of the thing we'll have time for when we let technology do more of the work and we have more leisure is building relationships. Both of you know that we started our working relationships with long discovery periods, 2 hours, sharing in each direction. Why are you the way you are? What happened? I've been in men's support groups where men overcome this macho bullshit overnight by listening compassionately to each other's stories. Yeah, we're a mess. Yeah, we struggle with porn and machismo and anger and all this crap. Well, women struggle with overeating and shopping addiction and, low self-esteem. But there's social roots to all of this stuff. And so when we get down to work together, then we stop thinking that it's about your personality or your racism or your sexism or your disrespect for authority, or, people come back and forth on both sides with their blame. The right is full of blame about laziness and ignorance and poor family values and not following somebody's religious protocol. And so don't think that, you've got all the answers because everybody you talk to is a fellow leftist or a fellow conservative. Just open up to we all have a piece of the answer, and together we have a bigger piece. And if we don't put our pieces on the table and shape them up into something better, we're going to be in this S-hole. Well, I noticed that she swore earlier in the podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to be in this shithole just for another 50 years, just like we have been since the post-World War II boom declined in the face of the McCarthy era, which was a big attack by conservatives on liberals and commies and all that stuff. I'll end with this. The left takes no responsibility for creating Trump. If the left had viable solutions, God bless Obama. He made me cry every time he spoke. But the mobilization piece was evident. The minute he got elected through a mobilization, he said, all right, I got this. I'll lead, my party and the people of this country. Well, you can't do it. You can't move the dial in with politics alone. And so, the left, with its blame and with its accusations and with its failure to come up with its own win-win version of the system, but sticking to this tax-funded solution, is responsible for people, half the population, literally, a little more when Trump was elected, a little less when Biden was elected. But this whole thing of staying divided over left versus right is the left's responsibility every bit as much as the right's responsibility. And we got fringe violent people on the left who are changing the conversation from should we solve these problems together to do those people have the right to burn down buildings or block traffic? I went through that exact same thing during the anti-war movement. I'd been in the Reserve Officer Training Corps. I was so straight that all I wanted to do was serve my country and get a scholarship. And I found out quickly we were on the wrong side of that deal. We were taking over a French colonial reconquest. And so I was part of legal, peaceful demonstrations to get us out of Vietnam. But when people would get violent, then the whole debate would change from should we get out of Vietnam to do students have the right to break windows and raid draft boards and all this stuff. And so the people on the right who are getting violent and taking over the government buildings, they're now turning off the leaders of the Republican Party. Yep. You can see that. So they will be very isolated as the new unity begins to build the new economy. They will be on the lunatic fringe with their violence and their hatred and their blame. All right. Thank you.
Joel, I'm going to jump in here real quick. Before this podcast started, we talked about you had mentioned a TED Talk, and I had just actually watched a TED Talk recently about self-awareness. Basically, 15-minute long presentation, but it all boils down to the people who are, or first of all, the majority of the people who think they are self-aware are not. Only about 15% actually are. So we can cut there, but essentially the difference between people who were self-aware and were not was the difference in the question that they asked themselves in any given situation. And most people ask themselves why. And we try to then decipher what happened, why did this situation happen to me? Why was I a victim of this? Why are they doing that? And it turns out that humans are actually very bad at drawing conclusions to the why. We often miss the mark because our brain comes up with, and egos and everything. So the real question we need to be asking is what, according to this TED Talk. And it's really, what can I be doing instead of focusing on the why so much and pestering in that and reliving that most people actually, the study showed that most people who focused on why were happy in the short term, but worse off or more depressed in the long term. And the people who asked what immediately were sad or more depressed in the short term, but were happy in the long term because the what turned into action instead of why did this happen? It's what can I do about this? And so if globally, this paradigm shift, if globally we can say this obviously isn't working for whatever sides you want to say, black, white, Republican, Democratic, Christian, Muslim, it's, whatever you want to say. If we stop saying why and why is everybody doing this to me, and we just say, what can we do about it together? I think this is much more palatable.
I love what you just said. And actually it made me think, because we just went through an exercise recently where we were talking to a group of people and leadership, in the country. And, because they want to, really help, build equity. Let's just say that, and really address the needs of underserved and underrepresented communities. And so in this exercise, again, the whole conversation is why, and, and so we pose three questions, and they all start with what. And now that you just validated that that was the right approach. Because we just, we just figured, why, let's change the conversation. And these were the three questions. Number one, what are you curious about? It's to create that safe space where you can have these conversations and not get all bent out of shape, or coming from a place of grace. One of our colleagues is always saying, so what are you curious about? So that way you open it up, to really, take a deep dive into, these conversations that people just feel that they don't have permission to even bring up. The second one is, out of everything we're talking about here, all these needs and challenges, what is most relevant to you and to what you do, to what you do and to your interests and your passion points. And, so because there are a lot of problems, the shit show is real, right? And there's just way too much. So not everybody, you need to choose, or just share, not even choose, is share what's most relevant to you from your lens, from your perspective. And then last but not least, what can you contribute?
Yep.
Those were the three questions that we posed. So what are you curious about? What don't you understand? What do you want to learn more about? Whatever. What's relevant to you from your lens? And then what can you contribute? And so then, and so I think that's definitely, very powerful, because it all ties into you really trying to change the way we approach other human beings, because it's the only, and I think the time is now. I think this is like prime time for considering other ways of approaching each other.
If I may, I want to say one thing out of my own life journey that was helpful, and then get back to this question of community, the new communities, and holding one another accountable, and also how to maintain the freedom to live your life the way you want, that the country was founded about. Nobody wanted to be under the king's rule and the church's rule. They wanted to go somewhere new where they could invent the rules, and they invented an economy. So our tradition in the American Revolution, the U.S. American Revolution, it has been just incredibly important to continue to value freedom. But it's been, my freedom with my foot on your neck, not, we're all in this together. So first of all, in my journey, one of the holistic parts was I had been a workaholic political activist, and then a workaholic business guy, and I had a workaholic near nervous breakdown. A friend pushed a book on transcendental meditation in my hands. So for a while I was a workaholic meditator, but it was an opening into my own journey of emotional healing and spirituality, healthy, balanced life. And one of the interesting things that I studied was A Course in Miracles. Marianne Williamson ran for president, and she's the biggest face on A Course in Miracles, which is, channeled material. That's not my thing. Christian based. I grew up Jewish. But what I noticed was, as we were studying it in a stuffy church basement one time, and people were claiming their enlightenment, we are, they were saying, like, I'm a recovering Catholic, and, I really get the wisdom of these holy books. I was listening. It was a hot summer day, and the basement was really stuffy. And in from outdoors were coming the voices of families and dogs and baseball. And I'm thinking, who's having a great life here, and who's sitting in a stuffy basement trying to improve themselves? And I invented this term, enlightened self-righteousness. And I think, everybody's got a big case of my way or the highway, enlightened self-righteousness. Now, what's that got to do with new solutions? So the old communities were kind of geographic. Within them, there were religious communities, and there were farmers, and eventually there were industrial workers. But local geographic community was synonymous with community. What community are you from? Well, this one, that one, the one down the road. Well, communities today, people aren't that engaged with their neighbors. And a lot of people bemoan that, but people find self-expression not in where they bought a house and who happened to be there when they moved. They find church community, they find political activist community, they find cultural communities, they find every manner of community. Now, what would the world look like if everybody's choice of communities was respected and supported? Well, believe it or not, it would look like the internet. Now, what does that mean? Because the internet is a phenomenon you could call mass customization. Mass customization comes out of industrial capitalism and the maturity of technology to where like a single factory can produce 1,000 kinds of bikes. Why? Because they can give you 25 kinds of frames, 25 paint jobs, 25 gear styles, 25 handlebar seat and brake styles, 25 kinds and sizes of tires. I mean, it's probably more than 1,000 different bikes from a single factory. Now, what's that got to do with the internet and popular culture? Because the internet is run by protocol, and we're going to point at many kinds of protocol. I'm just going to put a soundbite in here. If Dancing with the Stars can collect millions and millions of votes in 5 minutes, do you think we really have to go through this drama of months and months of political battling and funding all of this media barrage and all this baloney versus any day of the week we throw a debate into social media? We let people talk in their workplaces and in their communities and in their churches and synagogues and mosques, and people put in their vote over social media, and it guides our politicians, or it guides, our leaders of industry, or it guides our sustainability leaders. This once every 4 years stuff is really 19th century, not even 20th century. Then, now think about the internet. If you follow the protocol, the rules, if you don't follow them, you can't even get on. This is a technology thing. And Visa is a financial system run by protocol. It's called the interchange. Here's what you do if you're a merchant. Here's what you do if you're a bank. Here's what you do if you're a card holder. Well, the internet is high-tech protocol. The Visa's financial services protocol. And who's heard the saying, our leaders are just trusted servants, they do not govern? It comes out of the 12-step movement of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it means that the system's completely run by the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, and it's millions and millions and millions and millions of people all over the world recovering from dysfunction. It used to be called self-help groups, or it still is, but it's collective self-help. And that's what's wrong with the country today. Everybody's expected to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and solve their financial problems themselves, their health problems themselves, their addiction problems themselves. Workplaces will soon be bastions of recovery and creativity and reinventing the economy, because that's where we're well organized to produce and distribute needed goods and services, but we're going to do it cooperatively instead of competitively. So now what's that got to do with the internet? Once you follow the protocol and get on the internet, you get to play the game any way you want. You can be pro-abortion or anti-abortion on the internet, pro-guns or anti-guns on the internet, pornography or economic development and charity on the internet. You got to get that it's like a cooperative anarchy where nobody's telling you what to do. You get to do what you want, and you build your own communities. The internet is smothered in communities that align voluntarily and cooperate voluntarily. And so if part of what the new economic model brings is the right to function in the communities of your choice and not have the government give you a one-size-fits-all set of rules that you have to follow, or you're going to go to jail, or you're going to be economically disenfranchised, we got a shot at mobilizing people around that kind of a world. Yep. And believe me, with the efficiency of mobilizing all of our inefficient excess capacity, that's a motivation. I have one more sort of big picture thing, but I'll say this one quickly. The model we're talking about isn't a model of win-lose competition over money, and it opens the door to what we call continuous economic improvement. Mm-hmm. If technology's only and always improving, if global economic infrastructure is only and always improving, if human skill, knowledge, and creativity is only and always improving, and if our ability to use free renewable resources is only and always improving, there's no excuse that the standard of living and quality of life goes like this. I mentioned that, but what would be replacing it? Every advance in any of these factors of production automatically raises the quality of life and the standard of living across the board here and around the world, automatically shortens working hours because we're sharing the little bit of work that's left. Let me tell you, technology does more and more work. And instead of laying some people off and having some people work longer, faster, harder, technology is going to be shortening the work week for everybody. Read Walden 2 by B.F. Skinner, a 1950 book that said, here's how a ledger currency can make the quality of life improve across the board for everyone. And then what should be happening to the impact of economics on the natural environment? Less damage always to the natural environment from continuous economic improvement and what's called a circular economy. Anybody's waste is somebody else's raw materials and fuel. But do we practice it that way now? No, because the most efficient, cheapest, most profitable thing to do is money-centered economics, but we're moving to people, planet, and money-centered economics. And so it's win-win, sustainable, and equitable. Am I a raving maniac? Maybe you should cut that question out and you edit.
I know. I actually, well, then this would ruin my next point. So, but no, I think going back to we were talking about and where you took the community conversation of the benefits of the customized communities on the internet, and where I honestly before this conversation previously saw that as somewhat of a negative because it took away that localized community that held you accountable, because the disadvantage of the customized online communities is that you can shut out opposing ideas very easily. So I guess to this point and with this model that you're proposing is, in a way, this sort of balances out where society was when arguably it was working a little bit, and then the advance of technology of where society was supposed to improve so much, but we lost touch of the roots. So now we've gone too far of an extreme. And I think this working in the online economy with the excess capital, and then having the ability to do, again, community service and interact with your neighbors again, to have those different ideas and opposing ideas, I think will really actually justify the leaps and bounds we've taken in technology, again, with human nature and how society was formed, or was supposed to interact with communities and humans interacting with each other. So I guess I'm just saying, I think that this is, and I never saw it from this lens before, but I think this is the balance to the fears of where technology has taken society, as well as the fears of technology.
For me,
go ahead.
Real quick thing to slip in is, there's always been a historic debate, integration versus community independence. Mm-hmm. If you poll the African-American community, the Latino community, the Native community, I don't think you're going to get this unanimous, yes, put us in the suburbs with a bunch of white people, let us be a minority there. We can turn the ghost towns of empty campuses, declining inner cities, and dying rural towns. We can turn ghost towns into eco villages, and there's more than enough room for as many, a hunter's community, a vegan community, a pro-abortion community, anti-abortion. And then when we're all happier and we are cooperating economically, that's not building up, warring factions. That's destroying factions with a live and let live attitude towards life.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, listen, Joel, oh my gosh. And I know from experience that we can go on for hours.
Yes.
This is the tip of the iceberg. We're only scratching the surface here.
A little succulent nugget that we just had. So we'll definitely have you back to take a deep dive into each one of these aspects. I mean, and as we continue, right, developing this, because we don't know what it is completely yet. It's not fully developed, but it's gonna be good. And
I believe that we've met one another to build some curriculum that doesn't exist in the world right now.
Yeah.
And it's going to be DEI centered, but it's going to touch on everything, because you can't win in the DEI space without making it a win across the board, in healthcare and in jobs for all and all of that. So it's truly a leadership issue. I'm going to end my contribution by saying the world knows how to build anything. You give it a challenge like the moonshot Kennedy, 50 years ago, and we get it done. The world knows how to build anything. The world does not know what to build to solve for too much competition, too much global warming, too much this, too much that. And so it tinkers at the edges of the inherited economy of scarcity, and it doesn't think outside the box and invent the paradigm of sufficiency, enough for all.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, listen, I want to thank you for spending this time with us and for hopping on like last minute, notice.
It's a joy. I love you people.
Yes, and we love you too. Okay. And so listen, have a great rest of the week. And I'll call you so we can talk some more offline. Okay. Thank you. This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.